everyone, I am Dr. Sonal Jain from Department of Anthropology, University of Delhi. Today we will be discussing about Introduction to Forensic Science. We will be starting with evidence. Evidence is anything that tends to prove or disprove anything. In legal terms, evidence is something which tends to support something. When experts talk about the admissibility of evidence in court, they refer to its relevance, that is, pertinence to the case, and its materiality, that it tends to prove something. There are different types of evidence which are physical versus non-physical, real versus demonstrative, known versus unknown, and individual versus class. Now discussing about the physical versus non-physical evidences. Physical evidence consists of an object or things obtained from a scene of crime. For example, we have blood, shoe print, footprint, tire marks, etc. These are known as the physical evidences. Non-physical evidence is verbal testimony about a crime, or it may be someone's actions during a crime. Eyewitness statement also comes under the non-physical evidence. For example, if you have seen someone running away from a bank robbery holding a bag of money, the bag of money and the money inside the bag is the physical evidence, but the action of running away and the action told by some eyewitness is the non-physical evidence. Physical evidences include imprints, which could be fingerprint, footprint, shoe print, tire print, etc. Fingerprint could be latent print or the visible print. The prints which are not visible to the naked eye are the latent fingerprint, and the prints which are visible to the naked eye are the visible prints. Glass, hair, fibers. Glass are usually found where there is a robbery and there is a breakage in the home, etc. Documents could be financial documents, identification documents, for example, our Aadhaar card, our passports. The currency, if there is any fake currency, that is also under the documents section only. We have the dead body or the corpse. That is the major physical evidence which is found at the crime scene, because the most of the story is being told by the dead body. Then we have tool marks using various tools. We can have firearms, we can have bullets and their casings. The bullet can be found inside the victim and the casings on the crime scene. Then we can have biological fluids. It could be blood, semen, saliva, etc. And the chemical substances, drugs, chemicals, poisons. All these are physical evidences. These are certain examples. The first picture, if you can see, there is a form which we have to fill along with the collection of physical evidences. This form, where the person who has collected the evidence, his name would go there. The physical evidence which is being collected by the person, that has to be entered, and the signature of person and the date on which the physical evidence has been collected, and through there is a chain of custody which is being maintained while collecting the physical evidence. These physical evidences which is collected by first investigator at the crime scene, this is further taken by the police to the forensic science lab, and each and every person is responsible at the chain of custody. Then there is the murder weapon, which could be any firearm or any other knife. There could be blood, cigarette butt at the crime scene, the casings of the bullet at the crime scene, or there could be the dead body, which can tell us a lot of information from the crime scene. Now the second is real evidence versus demonstrative evidence. Evidence which is generated by the criminal activity is the real evidence, and evidence that is created to help explain or clarify real evidence, that's we call it as demonstrative evidence. Real evidence is usually found at the crime scene or elsewhere, and it pertains to the crime. That means it is related to the crime. Whereas the demonstrative evidence, it is generated after the crime by a criminal investigator or a forensic scientist. The real evidence, as we have discussed, they could be the various physical evidences which are found at the crime scene. But the demonstrative evidence, if the forensic science expert has done a 3D investigation and made a 3D model out of the crime scene, that could be a demonstrative evidence which can help the expert in presenting his case in the court of law. The real evidence As an example, there could be fingerprints left at the scene of crime or those obtained from a suspect. Other real evidence, as I have already said, there could be drugs, firearms, blood, etc. Whereas the demonstrative evidence is a 3D model of a crime scene made from photograph or measurements. Like if we discuss an example, there has been a crime conducted where a firearm has been used. Then we calculate the distance from where the bullet has been fired. We take all the distance, we take the distance of blood spatter, and on those cases the reconstruction of crime scene is being done with the help of by the forensic investigator. Then that evidence become a demonstrative evidence with all the physical evidences, all the inputs, all the photographs, all the video which the investigator has collected from the crime scene, and a 3D model is being created. That model or that crime scene reconstruction comes under the demonstrative evidence. Also, the various charts or graphs which we get from the confirmatory techniques like spectroscopy analysis, from the gas chromatography analysis, which shows the property of those substances, that also becomes the demonstrative evidence, and the expert can show that evidence in the court of law to prove his case. Then the next category is known versus unknown evidence. The most important questions that are asked about evidence at crime scene are: do we know where this evidence came from? What is the source of this evidence? Who left this evidence at the crime scene? The evidences whose source is known are known evidences, and the term unknown evidence refers to the evidence at a crime scene whose source is unknown. For example, a bullet found in the body of the victim of a homicide is an unknown evidence, and if we are able to find the firearm, and if we can recover the firearm from the suspect, and then we can say this particular bullet is fired from this particular firearm, and we can relate the bullet and the firearm, then we can tell this evidence is now a known evidence, as this particular bullet is fired from this particular firearm. Using the comparison microscope, we can identify that. Then the unknown evidence can become a known evidence after connecting it to the firearm. We have individual and class evidence. Individual evidence are the ones that could have arisen from only one source, whereas the class evidence that could have any number of sources, and in most cases the number of possible sources is unknown. For example, fingerprint examiners often testify in court that the fingerprint found on an object definitely came from a particular finger of the suspect, because the fingerprint evidence is the one evidence which can never be replicated. As I have mentioned earlier also, no twins can have similar fingerprints, and all the fingers of our hands, they have different fingerprints. So that is an individual evidence. But the cloth or the shoes which the victim is wearing, the same blue denim has been manufactured in bulk by the same brand. The same shoe has been manufactured by the same brand in bulk. So that is a class evidence. But cannot we identify the class evidence to an individual evidence? Yes, we can do that by looking at the individualities which are present in that class evidence. For example, with the law of progressive change, there might be certain nicks and cuts in that particular shoe which can individualize that shoe, or the pattern of walking of that person may release some pressure at some point and certain. So we can identify that this is an individual shoe, and we can straightforward tell the suspect using that individual evidence. In individual evidence, there are characteristics of each fingerprint on each person that makes the print unique. Whereas, as we spoke about the blue denim of the suspect, the fibers in a given pair of pants are not unique, as the mass production of same blue denims make it a class evidence. Whereas the all fingerprints are measurably and demonstratively unique, so that makes it an individual evidence. Now, various individual evidence, we have fingerprints and footprints. How we can compare them? In fingerprints, there are certain minutiae which we can compare. There are certain islands, and we can compare those points from the print which is found at the crime scene. We can compare those print with the suspect prints. We can do it manually, as well as there are certain softwares available like AFIS where we can put the fingerprint and the software can analyze and can compare the fingerprints of two persons. Similarly, footprints can being also compared. Then the handwriting analysis, we have handwriting experts and the handwriting can be compared with the known handwriting samples. The samples, the question documents which are found at the crime scene, those handwriting samples, they are being compared. We can take handwriting samples from the suspects and the handwriting samples then can be compared. Bullets and casings, comparison with the markings of test fired bullets, and they can be compared to know whether they are fired from the same particular firearm. The bullets have certain marks which are left by the firearm. We test fire bullets from the firearm, and those test fired bullets are compared with the bullets which are found at the crime scene using comparison microscope, and then they can give conclusive results and they can identify that this particular bullet is being fired from this particular firearm. Shoe prints and tire marks. We can compare with minute wear and tear details, nicks and cuts which are developed from time to time. Large pieces of paints, glass, paper, etc. They can being also compared. Fracture match or tear match comparison can be done, and we can say that this piece of paper has come from this bigger piece of paper. Glass evidence analysis. There are tiny glass or paint fragments which cannot be matched to fracture match, or they don't have any unique characteristic, so we cannot individualize them. Hairs and fibers, they can only be individualized only if they are DNA typed. If we have found the roots with the hairs, then only we can do DNA typing of those hairs. But if the root is not attached, then we cannot identify or we cannot say that this hair belongs to that particular individual. Otherwise also we can tell about with the microscopic examination, we can give a rough estimate that this hair belongs to the human or the animal. Then the illicit drugs. Identification of drug can be done, but source cannot be identified. We can particularly say that this drug belongs to this class, but we cannot say that this drug has come from that particular seller. The fire residues, we can identify similarly the class of residue, that this residue is either kerosene, gasoline, etc. But we cannot tell or we cannot prove that kerosene came from one particular can or that particular pump. So the class evidence to individualize, it gets little difficult, but with other evidences like the non-physical evidences, with the demonstrative evidences, we can reach to a conclusive result with that. Now the organization of a forensic science lab. We have various central forensic science labs in India and various regional forensic science lab and state forensic science lab in India. Mostly these forensic science lab, they follow an organizational structure. They are headed by a scientist designated as director, assisted by scientists at different levels, deputy director, assistant directors, scientific officers and technicians. Generally, the lab is divided into divisions headed by deputy directors or an assistant directors. All officers of the lab are empowered to undertake examination of case, exhibits and submit reports to the court through the director. So the person who is responsible for the analysis of that particular specimen in his division, so he has to present his report in the court of law, which goes through the director. A person, a forensic lab expert, for example, a person in the forensic biology division, a forensic biology expert will analyze a particular blood sample and the DNA report will be submitted by him, presented by him in the court of law through the director of that division and through the director of that lab. The organizational structure of a technical wing goes about the director. In the different wings, we can have the additional directors, we can have the deputy directors, then we have the scientific officer. With the senior scientific officer, we can have SSO, SSA, that means senior scientific officer, senior scientific assistant, then we can have scientific assistant, and then we can have the lab techs. With the administrative wing, we can have the section officer. Under section officer, we have various lab administration staff, we can have a peon, a gardener, and the post varies from various labs to labs. Now the units in a forensic lab. There are various case units in a forensic lab depending upon what kind of sample is being received by the forensic lab, that particular sample will go to that particular unit. For example, if there is a biological sample, if there is blood, semen, saliva, that will go to the biology division. If we have firearm, bullet, casing, they will go to the forensic ballistic divisions. But the one division which is common is the case receipt unit, where all the cases and all the exhibits are being received at a particular point at the entry of the forensic science lab. The case receipt unit did take care of the case exhibits and handling over the reports. This is the place from where all the exhibits are being deposited and all reports go out of this case receipt unit. The sealed parcels are accepted after examining the seals. Major thing to be noticed that the seal should be proper. The chain of custody should be maintained. Whatever the sample which is being collected from the crime scene, it should be sealed then and there only, and the person who has sealed, he should sign, and the person who is taking it, that person should also sign that this packet I have received in seal form and I am transferring it to the forensic science lab. The forensic science lab person, the case receipt unit which is receiving that particular sample for analysis, he should also check that the seal is not broken, and the person who will receive, he will mention that I have received this sample with the intact seal, and he will sign. So if there is at any point the seal is broken, we have to mention, we have to check the whole chain of custody, that at what point the seal was broken, who broke the seal, and who decided or who tried to change the samples in between. That will determine the chain of custody. So examining the seals, the condition of the packet, and the forwarding letter, that what kind of sample is present in that particular parcel, and that particular parcel is then, depending on what kind of sample is present in the parcel, is being transferred to the another division. Samples in the parcels are sent to appropriate divisions for the analysis, and after lab examination, whatever the sample is being remained, they are forwarded to the unit or to return to the police, depending upon case to case and lab to lab. So as we have discussed, that depending upon which sample has come to the case receipt unit, it will go to the different divisions. We have biology divisions which deals with various biological materials like blood, semen, saliva, hair, etc. And we go for DNA typing using various STR markers. Various preliminary tests are conducted, various confirmatory tests are conducted in this biology division. Firstly, the preliminary tests are conducted for the blood. We have to say whether the substance which we have received is blood or not. If it is blood, then it is human blood or animal blood. If it is human blood, then what is the blood type? If the blood type we are able to identify, then we can see and we can look for the DNA analysis. Then also this biology division also undertake examination of skeletal remains to find out species of origin, race, sex, age, stature of the biomaterials. Another division is, in the biology division only, we identify the dried blood stains and body fluids and examine them. We also compare hairs and fibers. Hairs also, they can individualize a person if the root is present. If the root is not present, then we can only comment whether this hair belongs to a human or an animal. It also identify and compare botanical materials such as wood, plants. Then we have chemistry division. Chemistry division carries out various chemical analysis, both qualitative and quantitative. Here also we go for various preliminary tests and various confirmatory tests. Here we can identify adulterated petroleum, fertilizers, medicines, burnt remains, etc. In some cases, if we have some toxic substances, that can go to some labs have chemistry and toxicology division together, and some lab have chemistry and toxicology division separately. So depending on if a toxic substance is being received, it can go to chemistry and toxicology or the toxicology division separately. The toxicology division undertakes chemical analysis of all materials related to suspected poisoning, stomach wash, vomit, injection site, etc. So this toxicology division we are talking about, the analysis, the samples which are coming, they are coming from the forensic pathology from the dead body. Supposedly a victim has died of poisoning. So the dead body will go to the forensic pathology section. They will conduct the autopsy. they will collect the viscera, they will collect all the stomach wash or all the vomit of those viscera, or all the washes will be collected, and in viable containers they will come to the toxicology division for the test to analyze which poisoning has caused the death of that victim. Physics division, here we analyze building materials like adulterated cement samples, cement sand proportions, strength of building material, etc. We analyze glass, sand, soil, paint, dirt, and various tool, cut marks, identification, restoration of obliterated marks, writing numbers. So the physics divisions take care of, supposedly a person has changed their number plate, they have obliterated the previous number of the engine, the chassis number. With the chisel they have removed the previous number and they have put the new number. So this obliterated writing, using various chemicals, we can identify on what was the previous number on which the new number was being written. In the cases also where there is the collapse of various bridges, there also the forensic experts will go and can take the sample if there is a collapse of any bridge or any highway or any flyover, to know what was the building material, like what was the mixing of the cement sample, was it according to the proportions under the guidelines. If it is not under the guidelines, then they can give a report that this particular bridge was not made under the guidelines, and that is the reason of its being collapsed. Then we have prohibition and excise division, where we analyze the sample of spurious and illicit liquors, alcoholic beverages, and the blood alcohol level. Usually in the cases of the driving with the drunk alcohol driving, in such cases we analyze those samples in this division, or any illicit liquor which is being transported from one area to another area. Narcotics division is specifically made for all the narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. Here all these drugs which are being received by the case receipt unit, they will go to the narcotics division, and we analyze all the drugs at this division and all the psychotropic substances here. Also we analyze various precursor chemicals used for manufacturing drugs and psychotropic substances. Document examination unit, usually we call it as question document analysis. That means the document which is under question, or for being the question is being raised. Supposedly there is any will or any handwriting analysis or any signature fraud or any check fraud, someone has given the wrong check or the fake check. Also we can analyze here various paper, pen, ink analysis, indentations, or if someone has burned or charred documents, those can also be analyzed here. This document division also analyze the various fake currency, counterfeit currency, our identification like passports, various cards, degrees. In the cases where people have made the fake degrees, that will also go to the document examination unit, along with all the counterfeit currency, the fake passports, the fake degrees. All these come under and summed by the document examination unit. The ballistics or the firearm division, that is the unit where the identification of firearms being done. The live or fired ammunition examination is done in this department. Distance of fire is usually we take to reconstruct the crime scene, that to know at which point the victim was standing and at which point the criminal was standing. So we calculate the distance, we see. So the blood spatter through the victim, all those distances are being noted down by the investigator at the crime scene, and in the lab the expert will reconstruct the crime scene to know the distance of fire where the suspect was standing and from where he fired to the victim. We can also correlate between the ammunition and the firearm using comparison microscope, and also the gunpowder residue analysis. The gunpowder is usually whenever a suspect fires a gun, the gunpowder will be here near between the thumb and the index finger. The wash of the suspect is being taken, and that can be, this residue can be analyzed, the liquid can be analyzed to know whether the gunpowder traces are present on the hand or not. The analysis of various firearms to know whether the bullet is fired from that particular firearm is also being done in the ballistics division. In the explosive divisions, we have any analysis of chemical nature of material used in an explosion, or supposedly if there is some attack, the explosive material will be collected from the site and those substances will go to the explosive division to know what was the cause of this explosion, which explosive device was used, whether it was TNT or what was the composition of that, nitroglycerin was used. This explosive division will determine that. The photography unit, that is one of the major unit, it examines and records the physical evidence at the crime scene and at the suspect's location. They click photographs and video record the crime scene, thus bring the crime scene to the lab. All the forensic expert will rely on the photographs taken by the crime scene photographer to reconstruct a crime scene into their heads, like what was from where the suspect might have entered, if there is a shuffle between the victim and the suspect, where it has been occurred. So with the photographs we can replicate a crime scene, or the forensic investigator can replicate a crime scene into their heads and bring to a 3D model, which is a demonstrative evidence and help in the solving the case. Now the latent fingerprint unit. Latent means the prints which are not visible to the naked eye. The various processes and examine evidence for latent fingerprints. Those found at surfaces and not visible to the naked eye, they are being examined in the latent fingerprint unit. They have a kit. This latent fingerprint kit is also available in the mobile forensic science labs, and they pick up the print from the crime scene only. They look for the possible surfaces where the fingerprint might be present, and then they use chemical to develop those latent fingerprint, and then they pick the print and take it to the forensic science lab for further comparison and examination. Polygraph unit, it uses lie detector, an essential tool of the crime investigator. Voice print and videography analysis unit, it involves the case of telephone threats or tape recorded messages. Also, investigators may be able to connect a voice to a particular suspect and can analyze various video recordings. Cyber forensics, the aim of cyber forensic is to determine who is responsible for what exactly happened on the computer while documenting the evidence and performing a proper investigation. The cyber forensic team is expert in collecting all the hard disk available there, all the monitors and laptops which are available at the crime scene. They have to collect it efficiently so that the data, it should not get formatted. Cyber forensic is needed for the investigation of crime and law enforcement. There are cases like hacking and denial of services attacks where the computer system is the crime scene. The proof of the crime will be present in the computer system. The proof can be browsing history, emails, documents, etc. These proofs on the computer system alone can be used as evidence in the court of law to sort out allegations or to protect the innocent people from charges. Now the forensic pathology, investigation of unnatural, unexplained or violent death. The forensic pathologist may conduct an autopsy. After a human body expires, there are stages of decomposition. We have rigor mortis, livor mortis and algor mortis. And during autopsy, the amount of food in the stomach can also give us an idea at the time of death. Various viscera is being collected during pathology and it is being sent to the forensic science lab to know if the death is being caused by the poison. Forensic anthropology involves the identification and examination of skeletal remains in order to determine if the remains are human or any animal remains. If human ethnicity, sex, age and manner of death can often be determined by an anthropologist, a forensic anthropologist may help to recreate the face, which will help us in the investigation. Entomology is the study of insects and their developmental stages. It can help to determine the time of death by knowing when those stages normally appear in the insect's life cycle. Entomology, environmental influences such as geographical location, climate and weather condition can also be known through the forensic entomology. Now the forensic psychiatry, study of human behavior and legal proceedings is required in both civil and criminal cases. In civil and criminal cases, competency often needs to be determined. In criminal trials, the evolution of behavior disorders is often required in order to establish the psychological profile of a suspect. In the forensic odontology, we include teeth to identify victims when the body is left in an unrecognizable state. Usually, the tooth enamel, it resists decomposition and outlasts even skeletal remains. That's why the whole mandible or maxilla is a great evidence to identify a person. A forensic odontologist also investigates the various bite marks which might be present during the sexual offensive cases. Now, crime is increasing day by day, and it is the duty of the state to create a crime-free atmosphere by keeping a check on the increasing crime and punishing the offenders. When a crime occurs, it is the duty of the police to trace and imprison the criminals. The crime scene is the most important place for the investigating officers, from where they can get the useful information about the crime and can gather evidences about what occurred during the scene. Today, the criminals are using advanced tools and techniques for crime. Without the help of forensic science, police is helpless and cannot collect useful information and physical and other evidences. Therefore, forensic science has huge role to play in tackling the everyday crime in our country. In school, every period ends with a bell, every sentence ends with a period, and every crime ends with a sentence. A famous quote by Stephen Wright. Thank you so much. See you again in the next series of this lecture.